So this session is all about off-campus housing. My name is Andrew Staples, and I work in the International Exchange Student Experience team. I'm joined here today with my colleagues, Marissa, who's one of our exchange coordinators, as well as Yuve, who is one of our international graduate coordinators. So both myself, Marissa, and Yuve, we're going to be kind of in the background. The star of the show today is Bree Cowan from Housing and Conference Services. So she's going to talk all about the various housing options. But before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. We do encourage you to ask questions. We want this to be interactive. The topic today is housing, so that is what we're going to be focusing our answers on. And we would like you to use the Q&A feature for any questions that you may have. So at the bottom of your screen, there should be a little button that says Q&A, and you will be able to ask your questions through that. And if there are any links or anything like that that we need to share, we will be posting that directly in the chat. So one thing that we do at McMaster in a lot of parts of Canada before we begin a presentation, we do something which is called a land acknowledgement. So the land acknowledgement is something that usually happens at the beginning, maybe a webinar or the beginning of a meeting. And it's really to sort of remember and reflect and recognize, the colonization and the settling that has happened on these lands. So McMaster University itself is on the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. In Canada, wampum belts are beads that are bound into strings, which narrate the Haudenosaunee history, tradition, and laws. So the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement was created to bind the nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy to the Great Law of Peace. If you can imagine the dish representing the shared land that we live, work, and study on, the one spoon reinforces the idea of sharing and peace of the land that we are all living on. So without further ado, I would like to pass it over to Bree Cowan, who's going to help support you with your off-campus housing journey.
Hi, guys. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. I am always excited to be able to talk about housing and off campus. Today, this is going to be our agenda. I'll start with going over with who you may be living with, types of housings that you would most likely interact with here in Hamilton around McMaster. I'll talk about some of the rental prices, just so you're aware of what the current pricing is, locations of housing around Hamilton, how to look for housing, and then just some safety tips. And then we will finish our webinar today with a Q&A session or question and answer. Like mentioned before, it'd be best if we can keep them to housing related questions. First, I'll go over some key terms that you'll run into whenever you are looking for off-campus housing. These are, again, just some general terms that you're going to come across. So rent is referring to the regular payment towards occupying a property. Rent usually happens, it's a monetary payment, typically month to month, or you pay monthly. And then it's set, the rent price is set between you and your land or your property manager, and then they'll set the price to what that rent will be and when you're expected to pay the owner by. Utilities refers to electricity, water, water disposal, heat, and sewage. This can be in addition to rental fees. Sometimes it's included in rent. So it's always good to look out for what's included in your rental price. But utilities is, again, just kind of referring to the electricity, water, heating, and all things related to that. Another term that you may see whenever you're looking at postings for houses is the term finished or unfinished. This usually just indicates, or sorry, furnished or unfurnished. My mistake. This usually just indicates whether or not the property does have furniture in it, or if you would have to bring your own furniture. There are sometimes that you can, like the property can be semi-furnished, so there could be a bed frame, a mattress, or say like the common room, like the living room, would still have like a couch in the room with some dining room chairs, a dining room table. But it's usually listed in the listing whether a property is furnished or unfurnished, and you can always talk to the landlord about what they have in the property as well. Another term that you may see is co-ed. So this is just referring to the sorry, this is just referring to more than one gender living in the same accommodation. The McMaster is surrounded by a lot of student housing. So there are some housings that have both genders within the same home. But again, it's usually indicated whether they are co-ed or not. And you can always ask your landlord, whomever you're speaking to, whether or not the other tenants of the property, if it would be a co-ed living arrangement. Another term that you may see is sublet. So this is a lease of a property by a tenant to a subtenant. So essentially this is, say I'm renting a property from a landowner. Um, yeah, landowner. And I have a co-op in a different city, and I need to move to a different city, but I'm still in a lease. I can always opt to do a sublet. So this is essentially me offering a portion of my term of my lease to another individual to fill that gap. They would pick up all of the rental fees for the term that I would be gone. And this would have to be coordinated with your the property owner as to whether or not you can sublet. Or this also may be if you're looking at currently available properties, it may be a sublet lease that you would be taking over. So it's just a term to look out for. Now, to talk more about what a lease is. So a lease is a contract outlining the terms under which the one party agrees to rent the property owned by another person. This is a legal document, so it is very important that you read over a lease agreement very carefully. The lease agreement will go over all of your responsibilities while being a tenant, like when you'll have to pay your rent, whether you would be responsible for whichever for the house. There are standard Ontario lease agreements. One caveat to know about this is if your land or your property owner is renting the house and they live in the property or a member of their family lives in the property, they're not subject to the same type of laws as a owner that doesn't live in the property. So it's always good to know whether or not you're living with the land owner or the property owner or someone that is related to them, because it just affects the legalities of like legal documents that they have to provide, or the setup of it is. But again, a lease is a legal document, so read over it carefully. This again will tell you the rent pricing, whether or not utilities are included, when to expect payments. If there's a deposit, some land or property owners will ask for first and last month's rent as just kind of a deposit. There could also be a key deposit, and this is just referring to the landlord's changing the locks on the door. So any previous tenants wouldn't have access to your current dwelling. So sometimes they'll ask for a deposit with that. And then it will go over the expectations of leaving a lease early if you have to, terminating, and just your rights to privacy and things like that. So it's very important to go over the lease carefully. This is always the interesting part as to who do you want to live with. Some of you may be coming to McMaster not knowing anyone. Others may be coming with friends. So it's always important to, if you do know anyone coming with you and you want to live together, it's always kind of important to think about what you would want while living with another individual. So I have kind of some examples here to think about. Whether there's like roommate A, like they wake up early in the morning, but and they go to bed early. They leave the dishes in the sink, but like washes when it's needed. They cook at home. They don't like having guests over and they like a quiet place, but they do drink regularly, smoke cigarettes, and anything like that in and around the house. Whereas roommate B, they wake up later, go to bed later. They do wash their dishes right away. They eat out a lot. And they like to have a lot of guests over. They like to have parties and host with friends, but they don't drink any alcohol and or smoke. So whenever like you're thinking about these two types of roommates or these two examples of roommates, think about what is most important to you while living with someone. Are you okay with there always being people over at the house? Do you care more about the cleanliness of, or the consistent cleanliness of your home, making sure that your roommates are cleaning up right away after themselves, and just like their daily habits? So always think about that. Ask those questions. You know yourself the best as to what's going to be the best environment for you, but always think about this where you can, whenever you're thinking about living with other people. We do also offer a program here at McMaster. It's called McMatch. This is an online platform where students can connect with others to find housemates living off campus. You can create a profile, and it just asks, it's kind of like a questionnaire of things like, do you like to wake up early? Do you like to study at home? Do you like to have friends over? All those kinds of things. You do need to have your McMaster ID in order to create a profile on this service. You can find, if you just see the link below, you can head to our portal and create a profile with that. The only thing that's really important to know about our McMatch program, it's really based off of the interest of other students wanting to use it as well. In the sense of it depends on how many other students are looking for those roommates and they're using the service as to the availability you see while using McMatch. Year to year, it depends on how many people are using this service, but it is still a source that you can use if you need to look for, or if you're wanting to look for people to live with, or looking to see houses that may need one occupant or anything like that. So now I'm going to touch on the types of housing that you're going to find in and around McMaster. So the big one is student housing. So this is shared with other students. Usually it's around 4 to 8 people in a house. Again, it really just depends on the house as to how many occupants are in the house. It typically is just a private bedroom. It can be partially furnished, so there could be things in the living room, in the kitchen, and you're sharing the space with other students. So you'd be sharing the washroom, you'd be sharing the kitchen with these other students. So again, that thought on cleanliness, what do you care for in terms of a clean house? It typically tends to be less expensive living with more individuals in a home. And the houses around McMaster are a little older, so that's important to note too. Some of them don't have air conditioning, but you can always, again, talk to the landowner about the dwelling. And these leases can range between being 8 months to 12 months. You will most likely run into lease lengths of 12 months. So that's just important to note too for anyone that may be returning home during the summer, or whether you want to stay in Hamilton during the summer months too for a full 12-month lease. Usually the lease lengths do start in May. They go May to May or May to April. There are a few that start in September, but it's more likely that you're going to see lease lengths starting in May. So the student housing, you can be in any location of the house. So you can be in the attic, the ground floor, upper floors, or the basement. Um, landowners, they do a lot to kind of like renovate their homes when they can. So they do maximize their spaces. Don't be deterred if you find a room in a basement. There are still a lot of lovely rooms in basements with lights and everything like that. One thing that's really important to note whenever you are looking at basement rooms, and I cannot stress this enough, a room has to have a window in order for it to be a legal dwelling. So if you find a room in a basement that does not have a window, that is a fire safety hazard. And I would not recommend living in that room because it's not a legal room. So make sure that if you are looking at basement apartments, that they have a window where the bedroom is. Another type of housing that you may come across is student apartments. There are a few around McMaster. I can never remember the one neighborhood. West End? West End. Yes, West End. There is a student apartment not far from campus. It's an easy bus ride. It's on the same street. This can be a single or a double occupancy. These are private rooms. They're furnished. You would have to bring your own like bedding and cookware and things like that. But it would be a furnished living room and kitchen. They do have roommate matching services. And these leases are the 12 months typically, and they do include utilities and they're move-in ready. So that's a good thing to be thinking about as to how much you want to be preparing with your move over. If you're okay with buying your own furniture and things like that, or if you prefer if an apartment was fully furnished, maybe this would be a better option for you. They typically tend to be a little bit more expensive, but it is still an option for you to look at those student apartments. And then as an add-on to that, there are just apartments. So these apartments you'd be sharing, there'd be a variety of people living in the other units. So it could be families, older couples, anything in and around that. So that's always important to note whenever like you just look at an apartment. Again, they can be single or double occupancy private rooms. Typically, they're not furnished, so you would have to buy your furniture for these apartments, and you could be sharing it with others. So if it's an occupancy, you could be sharing the other room with another tenant. And these again are typically the 12-month leases. The height of the building can range, so it could be like a 12-story, it could be a 4-story apartment. It really just kind of varies, but it is still an option there for apartments. So now I'm going to go over a room in a landlord house in a landlord's house. So this is what I was referring to earlier, where you'd be sharing the dwelling with the owner or a family member of the landlord. Um, these again can range in setups where it is like a private room. It might be furnished, it might not be furnished. You'd be sharing spaces with the landlord. So like the living room, kitchen, um, and like you could be sharing like bathrooms with others in the house as well. These particular housing types, they have a little bit more flexibility with lease lengths. So it could be a 4-month lease, an 8-month lease, or a 12-month lease. It really just kind of ranges as to what the landlord is looking for. Um, but again, the big thing with this particular housing option is it's not covered under the Rental Tenancy Act. So there are some things like legal things that they don't have to follow. It's really important if you are living with a landlord that you kind of go over the expectations of them or the arrangement and really look at that lease with them. And finally, another option too is 10 Bay residence. So this is actually a McMaster run and operated residence. So it's similar to what we have on campus, but it's just off campus. It's located in the downtown Hamilton core. Easy access on bus routes to get to main campus or Burlington. It is available for graduate students, fellows, and upper year students. So if you wanted to live in residence, you have this option to do so. We do have a variety of setups. The photo that you see right here is our studio. So there is like a washroom in there. It's a full kitchen. You don't have to have a meal plan while living in this residence because you have a full kitchen. It is, again, it could be a single or a double occupancy. These rooms are completely furnished, so you don't have to bring anything. You just have to bring your bedding, cooking utensils, and those kinds of things, but you don't have to buy any furniture for the room. It's fully furnished. And the building does have an extensive amenities. So there's a gym, there's study rooms in the building, common kitchens if you'd like to use that. There's a rooftop track, a sky lounge. There's a lot. These leases are about 12 months with utilities included. And there is also the option of graduate and go. So if you are, again, a graduate student or you're graduating and you graduate within your lease length, you can end your lease early by providing documentation that you are in fact graduating, and you can be let out of your lease early. And it is, again, move-in ready, so you don't have to worry about anything that way. So now to talk a little bit about rent. Renting in Hamilton, the pricing is fairly expensive. But for the standard, rooms in a student house can range from that 500 to about $800, and this would be plus utilities. Again, sometimes it's included, sometimes it's not, but this is just a range for you to be thinking about. For one bedrooms, typically about that 1,400 to 2,100, plus that hydro, plus the utilities. And same thing for a private student residence. It can be anywhere from 800 to about 12, or sorry, 1,200 with all of the utilities included. Please just be mindful, always be looking at all of the details to make sure that you do know everything that you need to pay in the sense of, does this price include utilities or is that utilities extra? Utilities can range in price month to month. So it could be $50 more, it could be $80 more a month, and so on and so forth. Again, kind of depends on whether you're living with more students or it's just you paying the rent and the utilities. Like I had mentioned earlier, there may be a key deposit. The key deposit's around $150. And you may be asked to pay first and last month's rent when signing the lease. And then another good thing to always kind of like think or take into consideration is just some other living expenses that you may have. So whether or not you want to eat out, what your monthly grocery spending may be, basic utilities. So again, what I had mentioned with the utility pricing. Internet is also something that you may have to pay extra in. So that's on top of the utilities, your monthly phone bill, and then just the month's rent. So it's always good to just kind of think about the estimated as a whole kind of thought. It's always good just to think about. So yeah, where to live. Always be thinking about what types of environments are going to contribute to your success. What do you want to gain while being at McMaster? What is your financial situation, and to what extent are you prepared to accomplish those goals? So just as an example for me, I definitely, whenever I was in university and I was living off campus, there was a lot of contributing factors as to where I decided to live. Like with my particular university, I opted to pay more money, but I was really close to my university. The particular apartment I lived in had a lot of amenities in it, but I was paying the price for those, and I was okay with it because it really helped with my personal success, as well as even just thinking about the people that I was living with. I had one housing option the first year that I was living off campus, and I opted to go to a different housing option in my upper years, just because that first environment just wasn't doing great for my personal excess or success with my academics and just my schooling and things like that. So yeah, always be thinking about those types of thoughts when thinking about living off campus. Now, where do most students live? This is a little bit of a map around McMaster University. Typically, students do live in the Westdale area or Ainslewood. One is either just to the side of McMaster, or the other neighborhood is just in front of McMaster. The city is very walkable, but usually you're going to be within 15-20 minutes of a walk to campus. I know that may seem like a long walk, but I promise the neighborhoods are really pretty to walk through. It's not as long as a walk as it may sound, because even walking the campus itself, it may take you 15 minutes to walk from one side of campus to the other side of campus, depending on the route that you take and things like that. Another place that students do often live is downtown Hamilton. It's very easy to access McMaster from the downtown core. Hamilton has a really great public transportation. So that's always a good thing too to be looking at whenever like you look at houses, is just how close it may be to public transportation. But you're always within a walking distance of a bus pat or a bus terminal or a bus stop in the downtown Hamilton area. And trust me, I've used it. So this is a big conversation to have. There are a lot of houses again within a 15-20 minute walk from campus, but it is still a very competitive neighborhood to be in, because obviously all students want to live close to campus if they can. Houses usually are not too far from bus stops, like I had mentioned. Always, if you can, try using Google Maps to kind of commute or estimate your commute times, because I know that's going to be really important in your decision as to where you want to live. And then how close you may be to other stores, so like grocery stores, pharmacies, and anything like that, gyms, and to whatever may be important to you. I do know that there is some students also, like they bring cars, so they tend to live, or like they live further away for cheaper rent, but they do drive their car and buy a parking pass for campus. So if you like, there's all the options that you can look into, think about it. Yeah. So how to begin your search. I know this is always a daunting and can be kind of scary to start your search. Housing is very competitive in Hamilton, so start looking for houses as soon as you can. Hamilton and like many other cities are in the midst of a housing crisis. Don't be scared of the word or the situation. It's not that you won't be able to find a house. It just may take longer to find a house. And obviously there are other students looking. So please start looking for accommodations as soon as you can. Most common like leases are from that September to August or May to April. From my personal experience, I find a lot more leases doing the May to April timeframe. And always focus on a place that's suitable for your needs, and then think about the things that you are okay to, like if there's one house that's really close to campus, but you have to pay more for it. Is that something that you're okay with? Or would you prefer to just take a longer commute getting to campus and pay a little less in rent? So just think about, or like there's other factors too, but just think of what is really important to you when thinking about housing. So there are services that you can use to find houses. So the first I will say is our MAC off-campus housing website. It is a really great start to like starting your housing search. We do offer a platform for students to use that will show available properties listed by landowners or landlords in and around the area. We do use a interim service right now. It's Places for Students. You can create a profile on their website and view properties within Hamilton. There's also a link that from our website that will take you directly to Places for Students. You do need your McMaster ID in order to create a profile. However, if you or you don't have an active Mac ID just yet, that's totally okay. You can email that email you see just on the screen there, ocho@mcmaster.ca, and you can request a temporary password so you can start your off-campus viewing, looking for properties. It is important to note that this service, although it is on our website, it's really just a tool for students to use to help navigate living off campus. McMaster doesn't have any handling how many like available properties there are, or what is listed on the site in the sense of like just how many rooms or properties are listed. However, we do have the availability with this particular service. If there's any issues with a landlord, if we ever get a complaint about a landlord and they're using this service, we can ban them from using the service. There is a way for us to make sure that students don't have to deal with bad landlords if we can help it. But for the better part, all of this, the people that you'd be speaking to would be landlords and not McMaster staff or anything like that. Other places that you can look for properties are Facebook groups and Facebook marketplaces. You can connect with landlords or other tenants looking for roommates or they wanting to list their property. There are listings of the Hamilton area, and it can offer applicants a space. But again, you can join those groups. Those groups, again, aren't run by McMaster itself, but I do know there are groups on Facebook that you can join to also find available housing in and around McMaster. So yeah, again, same thing for the marketplace. You'll just see property listings on marketplace. And yeah. Other websites that you could use are Kijiji, rentals.ca, rentseekers.ca. I would opt to start your search from the Mac Off Campus site, maybe even the Facebook groups, or going to rentals.com or rentseekers.com before you go to Kijiji. But they are other websites that you can use to start your off-campus journey, finding a property. For any of you that may be getting here early before your lease starts, or you're still needing a little bit more time to look for housing whenever you come to Hamilton, there is always temporary options that you could look into. They do typically, if you spend long periods of time, that costs you add up. But there are places like Airbnb and hotels and things like that that you can be using as a temporary housing solution if you need it. I would recommend starting your search there at tourismhamilton.com. That is a really great resource to look at for hotels in the area, or Airbnbs and things like that, if you need it. Now this one, always important to talk about scams and any fraudulent postings. You can usually pick out what is a scam just by looking at it. It's usually poorly represented on the website. They're asking for a lot of money, absurd amount of money, or they're asking for all of a rent up front. And typically there's a lack of transparency. You'll be asking questions, and the landlord isn't being like any help, is being giving very vague responses to things. And so always, whenever like you think about or whenever you're talking with potential landlords, just keep all these things in mind. Don't pay so much money for a home. You don't need to do an entire year's worth of payment upfront. Have those conversations with the landlord, but make sure that you're trusting your intuition. If it feels wrong, don't continue on with it. But yeah, it's always good to look out for. Before you move in, it's always great to try and make arrangements with your landlord to meet and receive your keys from your landlord. Some landlords have property owners, or property managers, sorry, property managers that manage the properties for them. So you may interact with a property manager before a landlord, but definitely try and have a face-to-face meeting with them just so you get to meet them. Always document any existing damages to your landlord and present them to your landlord, so you're not to be blamed for anything. Always ask them how garbage disposal is going to be, and the recycling, the yard responsibilities and maintenance, so shoveling, cutting grass, and where you'd be able to find your mail, and that. And you again will most likely have to be buying you will have to be buying all of your bedding, towels, pillows, and things like that prior to move in. And staying safe. So always lock your doors and windows. Never let anyone into your house that you don't know. Ensure that your smoke detectors are working, and your carbon monoxide detectors are working. This can also be done through your landlord, but you should be able to see a light on the smoke alarm. Don't overload electricity outlets or with extension cords or anything like that. That could be a fire hazard. So stay safe. Always stay near the stove whenever you're cooking. So again, any fire safety. And just beware of any bed bugs or pests and things like that. If you have any issues with housing, so say you're in a lease, you're having issues with your landlord or the property, there are supports that you can use. First off, always talk to your landlord if you're having issues with the property. There are local legal clinics that you can go to if you need legal advice. They are free of charge. So Hamilton Legal Clinic, it's close by. They're a really, really great bunch of individuals, and they do a lot to help you. McMaster can't provide any legal advice, but the Hamilton Legal Clinic is definitely the great source to start if you need any sort of questions, legal questions that you may have to ask, as well as any government sites. So you have more questions about your rights as a tenant and things like that. The RTA or the Residents or Residential Tenant Act or Landlord and Tenant Board are really great resources to learn more about your rights as tenants. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the team. Please use that email you see just on the screen, and we can definitely help guide you through any issues that you may be having, point you into the right direction of resources or ways to set up, say, an account on the Places for Students if you need that, or if you don't have you don't have access to your McMaster email yet, we can give you a temporary password to use to create a profile to start your search. But it is a great resource to use for just questions that you may have. But please feel free to ask questions.